This section, we only have 3 sections today. But this one, I was fuming at 2 a.m. last night, seeing this, right, from our Nicaraguan comrades saying, look what happened. Then Rubenstein was like, oh, this guy just got removed by Nicaragua. He was going to be the ambassador to the U.S. ambassador to Nicaragua. So, along those lines, and he was going up on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee to be asked questions by Rubio, by Tim Kaine, by who else? It was
Bob Menendez.
Bob Menendez, yeah, those. And he basically was advocating for regime change in Nicaragua. And we have some of the videos. But it's disgusting, guys. It's disgusting what was said and it's just really bad. So
yeah, let me just add a little caveat what's going on here. The way I clipped these up. Fam hit me up right away. She had the document. We had talked to our friends in Nicaragua and see what was going on. I immediately went and looked for the videos. Rubio had him up on his YouTube because obviously, fam, he's going to boast and brag about his mentality. And this is something we're dealing with here in Florida. Before the show, I was downstairs and I had to talk to somebody. I had a long talk about DeSantis and explain some of the reasons of why I'm particularly against them. This is something we saw at Freedom Fest. There is a push, and this is even in Rand Paul's book, The Case Against Socialism, right? There is a push that we are allowed to intervene in different regimes if they are a regime that we don't agree with, whether it's a communist or a socialist entity. And people like Marco Rubio, Bob Menendez, Ron DeSantis have this rhetoric open and out there because they have a lot of people convinced that it's a communist regime that we have the right, we can manufacture consent to get ourselves involved with. I'm not going to be an advocate for communism or socialism or capitalism ever. I won't do that. I've said this before. I'm a little bit more about a mixed system, but at the end of the day, my libertarian side of we shouldn't intervene is what shines more than anything. We have been down to the global South. The number one thing that these people want in the global South more than anything isn't socialism, isn't nationalism, isn't communism, isn't free trade, isn't bigger schools and whatnot. They want national sovereignty. They want the right to choose their government and pick their path forward. And that is something that we all should recognize, even conservatives, right? There's 80 bases in Latin America, ladies and gentlemen. There's a reason why the people migrate here. If we would just for once get our nose out of people's business and not stand behind the Monroe Doctrine, like when we start to play this clip, because I put it off in 2 sections, fam, of Rubio's opening statement, because it just really set the tone and the mentality and the rhetoric of the conservative Republican Party when it comes to Latin America. Nobody's drawing the parallels together and connecting the dots, seeing that the fact that we have so much migration because of our intervention. And if we would pull back on our intervention, we would have less migration.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm a conservative, I want to leave these countries alone. If you want to stop people from coming to the United States, stop interfering in their sovereign process. Stop trying to fix them. It's not your job. It's not. Nobody wants you to. Let them be, okay? And then you will have less people coming into the country. If that's the way you want to look at it, you want to stop these immigrants from coming into the United States. Well, then leave them the hell alone. Stop literally destroying their country so they have to come into other countries, because that's essentially what happens for all over the world, not just in Latin America, but in the Middle East, as we've seen, in Africa, as we've seen in Haiti, as we've seen. I mean, I could just go on and on and on about this. And that's why this is, but also I want to add that this whole thing is set up to make sure that you understand that China is the biggest threat we have, and that China is worse than communist Russia, the USSR, right? They still refer to the USSR, the Soviet Union. They still act like that's still a thing, even though Russia has long not been a communist country, and so they're still using that same rhetoric, but now it's like communist China and Putin's regime, Nazi regime, and all of this crap. So again, just this whole thing is used to say, oh well, we need to make sure we get in there and we stop Nicaragua and all of these countries that they mentioned. I think they mentioned Uruguay and a few other countries from
Salvador was a part of this whole thing.
China.
Yeah. El Salvador was all part of this.
Yeah.
El Salvador was all part of this because there was once again, they would try to get an ambassador there. And once again, and I've said this before, sometimes I get a lot of criticism for not so much liking, but respecting what a person like Bukele would do. And that's telling the IMF to go scratch. Now they're looking at him, unless it's just theater, they're looking at him and they're very pissed off of what he's doing there too as well. And the hypocrisy is something I want you to pay attention to, ladies and gentlemen. Everything that Rubio says, we have it in two different clips, same speech, we cut it in two. We'll stop and we'll talk about it between each one. But the hypocrisy, this mentality, fam, that they're trying to stop China and communism and authoritarianism is bullshit. It's what they're really trying to do is prop off the fact that they want this territory Monroe Doctrine style, so the corporations that put these people in Congress, like Rubio, can steal their resources, get cheap labor, and also make sure that we thrust our banking system on these countries. That is what it is about. It is not about authoritarianism and stopping communism and everything else. If a country wants to go with a certain system, they have every right to. So let's listen to Marco Rubio, ladies and gentlemen. The second part makes you just want to get nauseous when he starts talking about, oh my God, could you imagine if China had a base in this hemisphere? I'm like, homeboy, we got 1,000 bases around the world. Shut the front door. Here's Marco Rubio with his opening statement to the ambassador approval process and the Senate for Foreign Relations Committee.
Thank you for scheduling this hearing, and you've been a great partner to work with on this, and I appreciate it and look forward to working with you on this. Again, I want to congratulate each of you for your willingness to serve. Thank you for your willingness to serve, and congratulate you on your appointments and your nominations. And I guess I don't really have an opening statement. I do have sort of a mini rant to open, and it's not about any of you individually. It has more to do with our region. When I hear people talk about, like, we need to care more about the Western Hemisphere, it's reminiscent of, like they say, you also need to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables. It's a good thing for you, it's good for your health, and you should really do it. But most of us never get around to it. Well, speaking for myself anyway, I know I need to. So the point being is, this is not just a nice thing to do. It's critical to our national security and our national economic interests. Geography matters. It matters for a lot of different reasons, but it matters because proximity matters. And because we see it firsthand. There's look at the migrant crisis that we face on the border today. Those are all people coming from places where life is not good. And at the cornerstone of why life is not good in those countries, the violence, the economic deprivations, whatever it may be, is poor governance and bad decisions made over a sustained period of time. So that alone is a national interest. But then, not to mention, we do have near-peer adversaries. We didn't 25 years ago. The United States lived in a unipolar world where we were the only show in town. Now there are at least one unprecedented near-peer adversary. The Chinese Communist Party is a challenge to the United States, unlike greater even than what the Soviet Union was, because they are a commercial rival, a technological rival, a geopolitical rival, a diplomatic rival, and a commercial one. And in addition to all of that, they are also a military threat to the country as they continue to develop. And they have an interest in the region. They want to extract minerals and have mineral rights, certainly, but they also want leverage. They want control over countries so that they'll vote with them at international fora, and ultimately so they could potentially position themselves either on a rotational basis or permanently all over the world militarily and the like. In essence, they would love nothing more than to encircle the United States and to have put themselves in a position in each of the countries, for example, that all of you have been nominated to serve in, but more broadly in the region. They want to be in a position one day to, no matter who gets elected in those countries, do whatever they want because that country owes them too much money and they own too many things in that country to break away from it. And so that's...
Okay, fam, there is so much shit to unpack there. This guy is one of the worst, Marco Rubio. He is the biggest full of shit person I've ever seen. I like to see these guys in a debate. One of the things that I love about the person who confronted Ted Cruz about his policies towards Venezuela, is that he confronted him saying, like, well, why do you think we should do this? And Cruz couldn't even answer the questions. He was trying to fight his way out of a paper bag, a wet paper bag that he couldn't even get out of and stuff. But Rubio is the same person. He'll just tell these falsehood, these lies that a small group of people believe in and expand upon that. The way he starts off that, guys, the way he manufactured consent, we need to get involved, fam. Getting involved with these countries is like eating fresh fruit. It's a given. You should do it. It's healthier for you. Why don't you eat the fruit? We need to be involved. When people say we need to be involved, that's already a given. You have anything to say about that, about point number one? Because that is just like, are you frigging kidding me? And people really believe this crap.
Yeah, and then he blames the countries.
Well, that was the
he
second
says
part.
Poor management. Yeah.
Right? These places are not good. They're mismanaged. You know what I'm saying? Thank you, Mom. These places are not good. The people are coming here because, they've been mismanaged and whatnot.
Yeah.
We didn't leave the right management there. And what. It's got nothing to do with the intervention. It's got nothing to do with us, picking their governments whatsoever. It's all about that. Then he goes to the CCP, right? Now it's all about, oh, God, we got to stop the CCP. And everything he was talking about, what they wanted is something that we have had. We want to extract those minerals, right? He's totally projecting. We want to extract those minerals. We have all the corporations in the global south that already take all the resources and extract the minerals. We got all the receipts, right? And then at the end of the day, fam, the thing that really blew my mind is they want to put somebody in charge who will do what they say. That seems like very, I know a country that's trying to put people in charge of the global south so they'll do what we say, right? Weren't we just in Honduras where they put Juan Orlando Hernandez in charge because he did whatever they wanted to? They just handed over all the corporations to him. It's just like Bolsonaro in Brazil. He did what they wanted them to do.
In Venezuela.
Juan Guaido, if they got him in.
If they got him in. I mean, that's the thing. Like they take whatever their enemy is doing or what they're doing and blame it on their enemy, which is classic projection. But one of the things that really stuck out to me was him admitting, again, this is just another idiot, another asset, right, of the empire, admitting that the United States used to call the shots, that the United States used to be the boss, used to live in a unit. He uses the word unipolar or unipolarity 20 years ago, he says, but now things have changed. Of course, so he's admitting that the United States, and he's yearning and lamenting that it's no longer like that anymore. So yes, they know that there's a shift happening, that this, unipolar world in terms of the United States being the only dictating big type of government is no longer the case. So he's yearning for the days when that used to be the case and basically saying, we need to go back to that. And now we have this bigger enemy that's bigger than the Soviet Union. Now we have communist China, and communist China is going to come in and do all this to these people. So he's essentially trying to say, oh, it's communist China and we don't like them because they're communists. But it's more of the fact that they don't like China because of the economics, because China is growing economically and gaining power politically on the global strategic political stage. And they don't want that. And so he's using this rhetoric to say, if we don't stop China, then they're just going to do this to these poor countries, things that we all know very well that the United States has done. And again, you don't have to love China to know a few facts about China, that they don't have military bases all over these countries, and that the relationship with these countries in a lot of ways, I'm not going to say all of them, but at the very least in the ones I know in Bolivia with Nicaragua, those relationships are more of on an equitable basis, at least in certain terms, where the people feel like they're getting something out of China. And in terms of transportation and such, the infrastructure, and people really see that. I mean, I think our comrades that live in Bolivia could talk a lot about that, about how that's helped them out a lot too. Regardless of how you feel about China, that's why so many people cooperate with China. So many nations. Should they get to a point where they don't have to? Yeah, of course. But they have the sovereign right to have a relationship with whoever they want, just like you have the sovereign right to have a relationship with whoever you want. Like, what is, the United States needs to stop being everybody's daddy.
Well, the two things that come to my mind is, number one, I want to be able to counteract the way he's trying to sell this. Mr. Rubio, Mr. Cruz's, Menendez, when we get to him, the Tim Kaines, how does he continue to sell it? You know what I'm saying? And a lot of times as he gets deep into this, and obviously they're just going to use little cuts, little clips of certain things that are really attention grabbing. But if you listen to all these things, and if you listen to the whole speech, the thing that really kind of gets my mind is, I don't know where or who would kind of stand back the fact that we need to move towards a unipolar kind of world, that is okay, that it's good, that it's justified that we should be the world's police. It's justified that we're fighting for democracy and freedom. It's justified we go into these countries to stop them from communism or socialism. It's justified. I want to know that. But I also want to know, too, as well, how we push back against his manufacturing for consent and his justifications for empire. What can we do? What can we do as a United States citizen? What can we push for? Because to me, the reason why they want to make sure that we have all these cheap resources down in South is because they don't want to have to pay for the labor over here. Like, that's the whole thing we were talking about, the semiconductors. If the semiconductors leave Taiwan and they have to come over here, now you can't skip on the labor. Now you got to push, you have to pay people. Same thing will happen in the global South. All that cheap labor will go away, and corporations don't want to do that because it cuts into their CEOs' profits. That's what they want to do. So we have to be able to convince people, hey, man, this is a good thing as a conservative. We got to bring some form of manufacturing back here. How about all those plants that are in Mexico, right? We close them down, we bring them home, and we pay people in Michigan or Indiana where all these plants were before. Before we went and we opened up NATO and we went everywhere and stuff like that. How about we start growing our own bananas? We get our own soul. Thank you, Mom. We grow our own bananas. We do our own thing. We don't rely on the resources over there, because here at the end of the day, the big problem with the United States is we don't make anything anymore. We don't fix anything anymore. We don't grow anything anymore. It's very limited. Everything we do is now outsourced. And when you got an idiot like Rokfin who's going to say, well, we need to stand up to the Chinese, fam, because they need us to sell all their products to. No, they don't. They got all new markets waiting to sell their cheap products to. All new markets in Africa and South America. They don't need us. We need them. We've put ourselves in that situation. Hey, one thing that Donald Trump said he was going to try to do was try to bring manufacturing back home. He wasn't successful at it, but he took a stab at it, and the thought process is right. Let's bring our stuff back home. Let's close our bases. Let's bring our boys home. Let's start making shit in the USA again. Let's start making things. Let's start growing fruit that ain't grown anywhere. Yeah, the labor is going to cost us a decent amount of money, so the CEOs can't make crazy profits. But this is where you get into, like, the profit sharing, the co-op businesses. This is stuff we need to do, and we can do here if we can convince those people, those conservatives, that we don't even have to mess with those countries, whether they be communist or socialist. Let them make their own decisions. Let's worry about us for a change. And that's what they're duping us on, especially cockroaches like Marco Rubio.
All righty.
The next part of the clip, this is his opening statement. Remember, fam, he goes, I don't have a statement. I just have a little bit of a rant. He's ranting. Marco Rubio's ranting, everybody. Here we go.
That's the fundamental challenge that all of you are walking into. And in the context of that is how I think we need to guide our foreign policy. And so I hope we'll have a chance to talk about that today. As we go through some of the countries highlighted here in today's hearing, in Uruguay, we have a president who's been trying to work with the United States on things like reducing barriers to trade. But unfortunately, because we don't have a strategic approach to that relationship, it's not a partisan attack. I think you can say that of virtually any administration in the last 30 years, because we don't have a well thought out and executed a strategic approach to the region. You have someone who basically feels like his only options for development are to cut a deal with the Chinese Communist Party, do a deal with the devil in that regard. In Suriname, you have a president who's struggling to manage more than $1 billion in Chinese debt that his predecessor took on. And we have this administration that has this single-minded focus on climate change, and therefore it doesn't seem interested in helping them develop markets and or their capabilities because it happens to be oil and gas. And in El Salvador, we have a very interesting situation. On the one hand, we've seen some of the, obviously there's been economic chaos, some of the internal political things. I'm not a big fan of everything that's been done there, but I also think it's a relationship that it's important for us to manage appropriately. And our charge, I believe, has left post and sort of announced some strategic pause in efforts to reach out to them. So, as we talk about going there, Mr. Duncan, it's a very, very challenging situation, and one that I'd love to hear your thoughts as to what the road forward is, because I'm hoping that we can still have a relationship in El Salvador that's pragmatic. We don't have to clap or celebrate all the stuff people do that we don't necessarily think is good, but I also think we have a national interest concern there that needs to be balanced. In Trinidad and Tobago, the Prime Minister, unfortunately, continues to be a supporter of the Maduro regime and signing agreements to join the Belt and Road Initiative of the Communist Party. Nicaragua is a horrific disaster. I think it's the second.
That wasn't, we were supposed to play it all the way through, so because he was talking about Nicaragua, that was the most important part. No big deal, no big deal. Fam, do you have anything about to say that? Because once again, he's talking openly about the fact that these countries don't have a right to their national sovereignty. They're still propping up the Maduro regime and doing trade deals with them when we told them that's a no-no.
Yeah, can we hear the rest of that? Because that was the main point.
Yeah. Play that, yeah.
Before I run out of time.
No. Pause. That's a different
Nicaragua
one.
A free nation?
That's a different one. Oz, the end of the first one. That's like 10, 20 minutes later. This next clip. The end of the second one. Play it all the way through.
That's the fundamental challenge that all of you are walking into, and in the context of that is how I think we need to guide our foreign policy. And so I hope as to what the road forward is, because I'm hoping that we can still have a relationship.
I don't think so.
In El Salvador that's pragmatic. Here. We don't have to clap or celebrate all the stuff people do that we don't necessarily think is good, but I also think we have a national interest concern there that needs to be balanced. In Trinidad and Tobago, the Prime Minister, unfortunately, continues to be a supporter of the Maduro regime and signing agreements to join the Belt and Road Initiative of the Communist Party. Nicaragua is a horrific disaster. I think it's the second.
Oh, you got to cut.
Okay, so he's gonna say it's
in Trinidad and Tobago.
No. Can you play it or no? It's cut?
No, it's not cut.
And just as important is this is a country where the president arrested every one of his political opponents.
There it is.
If you ran for president, you went to jail. Not even Putin arrested everybody. He at least has an official.
I wanted fam to hear that.
This is it's pretty stunning, the direction that's taken. And even more troubling is they have now rolled out the red carpet, this open invitation for both Chinese and Russian military stationing in the region. I think the Russians have their hand full right now, but you could see a presence there. But the Chinese may one day take them up on it, and that would be. If we wake up in a world where the Chinese have a military basing arrangement in our own hemisphere, it would be a very troubling turn in regional affairs, and one that I think is a threat that we can't overlook. So, all of these places we're facing some real challenges, and I'm hopeful we'll be able to talk about those today.
Yeah.
That was important. I wanted you to hear the end of that, fam, too, as well. The next clip is good, Oz. It will be when they get further into the hearing. But, fam, once again, pulling back from the national sovereignty, a way to make sure that not even Putin, fam, is as bad as Daniel Ortega. His crazy wife is there doing all these things. He jailed all his political opponents. And I had this argument when I went into that anti-socialist, that panel, and they were like, he jailed all his opponents. And I was like, and you know why? And they're like, why? And I'm like, Because as an opponent, you can't be taking money from NGOs like the NED, which are considered CIA light.
They
It's
weren't
part of
even
regime
opponents.
change.
It goes further. They weren't even opponents. They had literally said, we want to be president. We want to run for office. And they had started taking, working with these NGOs to help overthrow the government, like you just said. And the Sandinistas know this very well from their history. They know, one thing I will say about Nicaraguans is they know their history very well, which is why they're not repeating the same mistakes like other countries that don't know their history. And so that whole rhetoric, that whole excuse was used by the entire Western Hemisphere. The New York Times, both liberal and conservatives, were saying the same shit. And we went, Jonny and I, we went to the magistrate and the president of the CNE, of the Supreme Electoral Council of Nicaragua, and we asked those questions. And we literally got those answers. Like, they showed us this whole handbook. They're like, they weren't real candidates. And then the people that did file to be candidates were working with NGOs to overthrow the regime, which is, ask the United States about coups and insurrections and if they're partial to them on their soil. So I mean, you know what I mean? If somebody was caught working with Russia to overthrow the United States government, literally being funded to run for office to do that, I think the United States would have a problem with it. But of course, he goes on and uses this exact talking point. And of course, again, I was laughing at the end because imagine China having military bases on our hemisphere, but we can have military bases on their hemisphere and every other hemisphere. Come on, guys.
We wake up one day, it's like the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's okay for us to do whatever we want. We can actually arm missiles on through NATO, put them on Putin's border, and yet where he's the bad guy or they're the bad guy if they want their own national sovereignty. Fam, the next part is just when there were 4 ambassadors trying to get confirmed. If confirmed, fam, I will definitely stick by your things. Here is Rubio with a little back and forth with the person who was set to be confirmed, but obviously we know what happened. We'll go into that a little bit more. With one of the ambassadors that was nominated. Let's take a look. This is with the Nicaraguan ambassador.
Before I run out of time here, Mr. Rodriguez, the CAFTA is an agreement, preferential trading arrangement among free nations. Is Nicaragua a free nation? And if they're not, then should we continue to provide the preferential trade benefits that CAFTA provides to free nations? I mean, the point of it was to encourage the opposite of everything that Ortega and his crazy wife, who's the vice president, are doing.
Thank you, Senator Rubio. Let me just say, if confirmed, I would support using all economic and diplomatic tools to bring about a change in direction in Nicaragua. Removing Nicaragua from CAFTA-DR is a potentially very powerful tool and something we have to seriously consider. I know we currently exclude Nicaragua from supporting functions under CAFTA-DR, trade development capacity building activities and the like, but if confirmed, I commit to working with USTR and other agencies within the US government to evaluate all possible means for bringing that pressure to bear.
Bam, all possible means sanctions, blockades, more acts of war. And when Marco Rubio says the point of the CAFTA was to make sure that, it's about human rights and not abuses and letting the free world be free, it's not. The point of it was to change their behavior to do what we wanted, the empire, and that is it at the end of the day. We want control of this country in our own hemisphere, and we think we have the right to control it. And everything that comes out of all these politicians' mouth, they prove it when they say it. It's our land is what it's almost as if they're saying Nicaragua is part of the United States and we have a right to do what we want if they don't behave the way we like.
That's essentially what they're saying. All diplomatic tools, as you said. I mean, this guy is supposed to be representing Nicaragua, right? So this is, of course, why, because you just heard this guy's rhetoric. He's basically saying he would do whatever the United States wants, and essentially there would be a coup of Nicaragua, because that's what it would take to have this happen. So Nicaragua withdrew their approval of this guy, Hugo, Rodriguez, who was a candidate for the position of U.S. ambassador in Nicaragua. Okay. After, of course, he basically, like you just watched, committed to push for regime change. And Bob Menendez, Marco Rubio, and others went on to ask him questions, and we have a little bit more on that. But this is what Nicaragua said. Daniel Ortega, well, we got it straight from the Ministry of Exterior Relations. And they said they addressed this to Anthony Blinken because he is, you know, the dude in charge. And they said that they took this guy out because they heard during the confirmation hearing of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he made interventionist and disrespectful statements against our country, ignoring the principles of international law, the charter at the United Nations and the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. The government of Nicaragua, in use of its powers and its exercise of its national sovereignty, immediately withdraws the placet granted to candidate Hugo Rodriguez. We reiterate that every diplomat has the duty to contribute to respect and understanding between peoples and governments, that is, between the human community. We recall that based on the diplomacy and in compliance with the postulates of the Vienna Convention, an ambassador or candidate for ambassador cannot get involved in the national issues that are specific to Nicaragua, and much less disrespect, offend, humiliate, threaten, lead, or be a factor of interference or interventionism in the internal affairs of our country. Signed, Denise Moncada, Minister of Foreign Affairs. And you can see that. And guys, I mean, this is just, Nicaragua has the balls and the cojones and the ovaries to do what many countries don't do. They kick the OAS out. They really are pretty much kicking anybody out that is using this sort of rhetoric. So there's a couple more things here. Here's a question from Senator Bob Menendez. This is, look, notice how they do the questions, right? Nicaragua has been at risk since 2018 when the Ortega regime cracked down on peaceful protests. Peaceful protests. Do I need to tell you what the hell happened and how many people died and how people were killed and tortured in the streets, literally, and how we spoke to those people and how they lost family members, friends, how it destroyed, like they almost were able to coup, but they failed this coup. And the Nicaraguans are very proud that they stopped this coup from happening. Hundreds of deaths of Nicaraguans resulting from the freaking coup plotters, not from Ortega. Since then, aggression against the opposition and civil society organizations has increased. The country is becoming a totalitarian regime. What steps would you take to avoid such a humanitarian disaster in Nicaragua? And the response was, we must mobilize countries and governments around the world to put pressure on the government of Nicaragua. So we must mobilize other countries and governments to get involved in Nicaragua, is what this guy's saying, particularly in relation to the release of the 190 political prisoners. If confirmed, I promise to work with the United Nations Human Rights Office, the OAS, Europe, and Canada to further isolate the Ortega regime. How can a person like this, how can you not kick him out into outer space?
Yeah, no, I mean, they're still going to, you know, you can talk, if you constantly repeat the lie, it eventually becomes the truth, right? So now a lot of people who don't understand or haven't gone there, who haven't read or are privy to the independent news that we are, really think that there was a crackdown against peaceful protest in 2018. They're trying to paint this picture like people try to raise up against the Ortega government and then he ruthlessly put them down. It's a lie. We have all the receipts. It was an NED-funded coup that they tried to remove the government, right? And this is the same government. Daniel Ortega was one of 9 Sandinistas leaders. There was a big controversy. A lot of you are too young to remember this, or it was before your time, the Iran-Contra scandal, where they literally sold cocaine, took cocaine, turned it into crack, sold it to the streets of New York and California, took that money, bought weapons from Iran, to take back to the Contras to fight the Sandinistas for control of Nicaragua. It literally happened. We have all the receipts. Why are the same idiots with the same ideology try to spew their shit again? Why? How are they not being called out plainly? Like, why are you messing with Nicaragua? It's like when we mess with Iran. We have the receipts of the coups, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, so let's play Bob Menendez's video, yeah.
You're going to get pissed off at his behaviors, fam.
Mr. Rodriguez, Nicaragua has been in a state of crisis since April 18th of 2018. That was the day the anti-government protest triggered a years-long wave of repression that has killed 329 people, injured thousands, and condemned 190 political prisoners to arbitrary detention in conditions amounting to torture. The Ortega regime has no shame. They have jailed, expelled, harassed political opponents, former lawyers, business partners, representatives of the Catholic Church. They have shuttered organizations that feed and shelter Nicaraguans. They've closed 8 of the country's universities. They've attempted to withdraw from the Organization of American States, all while cozying up to Russia. They've even kicked out Mother Teresa's missionaries of charity. Nicaragua is on the path to becoming a totalitarian dictatorship. We often talk about how to respond to crises instead of investing more in prevention. Our Renacer Act, which was signed into law last year, lays out a framework for U.S. policy. We need to act now. So if you are confirmed, what steps would you take to mobilize a robust international strategy to prevent the onset of a deeper humanitarian crisis in Nicaragua?
Thank you, Senator. If confirmed, as you point out, we really need to mobilize voices from across the region and around the world to call out the human rights abuses, to call out the undemocratic actions that the government of Daniel Ortega is taking. And we need to call for the immediate release of the 190 political prisoners that you mentioned. If confirmed, I commit to working with UN Human Rights Council, OAS, our partners in Europe and Canada, to seek their voice and their action in the form of sanctions, to join our efforts to highlight the abuses and to isolate the regime of Daniel Ortega.
Fam, I'm going to commit to stop pulling what Menendez did there. I know I do that often. Menendez probably has better more of a right to do it, but when you say certain words, you just say them in a Spanish accent. I'm going to work on not saying Nicaragua. Like, I'm going to say it like a normal white gringo would say it and stuff, but that pisses me off about the whole thing. But I like the way he was kind of also pointing at the Catholic Church. He think he could just virtue signal and throw the word Catholic Church out there and it's holy. And even Ortega is evil against the church, fam. You know, even he's trying to signal, you know what I'm saying, to the conservative Catholics in Florida and all around the world or all around the nation that will buy this shit. The Catholic Church was the opposition. There's videos of members of the Catholic Church torturing Sandinistas in Nicaragua. So that's just bullshit. Also, the Renacer Act he kind of mentioned too again, which is an act when I remember I got all pissed off at Tulsi for not mentioning the Renacer Act because it was an evil piece of legislation. The OAS, which we know, which is a CIA light, which they are the vessel to make sure that these elections are fraudulent in the favor of the United States puppet. And for this asshole to say the undemocratic process, well, you're talking to two people who were there, Hugo, and we can tell you is a much more clean, transparent, representative, and fair process than what we have in the United States of America. Go scratch, pal.
I know. Can we get some of Nicaragua's election reform in the United States? I mean, I would be very happy. Please. Just a little bit. I mean, there's not much else to say. I mean, the guys, both of them are just, you know, and of course, Menendez is one of those gusanos. He's a gusano. He's, you know, he's
That's
a gusano.
all we got is
you know?
gusano, fams. We got nothing but gusanos. All our Latin members are gusanos in American
They
Congress.
are.
Where's AOC? Where's AOC at?
Oh God. So you guys saw that, right? You guys heard that. Okay, so let's just play the next one. And by the way, they talk about how Nicaragua is doing terrible. Nicaragua is not doing terrible. Nicaragua is improving economically. And they very food self-sufficient, efficient. They have food sovereignty. They have healthcare, and they have a mechanism to help people buy houses to where it doesn't cost them very much. And so that's why you don't really see. And Franco also went to Nicaragua, and he's like, I saw way more homeless people in the United States than I saw any in Nicaragua. And I mean, that's another person that you guys know, that's fam, and that he went, with family. He didn't go like we did, but he pretty much said the same thing. Now, they always talk about how Nicaragua isn't doing well. And then the treatment of women, of course, is great in Nicaragua. They have women in positions of power, but also pay them the same. They don't just virtue signal about how they believe women and care about women. It's a whole different thing, the feminist movement there, than it is here. So question from Senator Bob Menendez. I'm just going to read what it says. I think if we haven't heard it, we will. What steps would you take to guarantee the implementation of the Renaissance Act? Isn't this the one he just went over?
Yeah.
This is
We
about
just
the
have the
Renaissance
video.
Act. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, and so there's another video, right? You have
Yeah.
another video?
I do.
Okay, so let's just go ahead and play the next couple videos.
Let me follow up with something that Senator Rubio raised. Our Renaissance Act lays out congressional guidance on suspending Nicaragua from the CAFTA-DR trade agreement. And I know it's a powerful tool. The same thing with El Salvador. But we entered into these agreements with a universal concept of who we were entering into. Nicaragua certainly does not fall in that category at this point in time. What steps will you take to implement what the law says? And do you commit to keeping this committee informed on a quarterly basis on the nature of Russia's deepening cooperation with Nicaragua?
Yes, Senator, I commit to
bring in
keeping
Russia.
the committee informed. In addition, if confirmed, sir, I commit to adding my weight to the full implementation of the Renaissance Act. As I mentioned, working
Commit
with
to bending
USSR
over
and others on
at
the
all
CAFTA-DR
costs.
question. Continuing to implement the act in terms of holding officials in Nicaragua accountable for the human rights abuses. We recently
motherfucker
sanctioned
wasn't gonna
another
do
23
anything.
individuals under Section 353. Thanks to the Renaissance Act, that is a new capacity that we have, and we're taking full advantage of it. Again, Senator, if confirmed, I will work with our interagency colleagues to maximize the pressure, both through Renaissance and all of the tools that the Senate.
I look for that. We need a strong voice.
We need a strong voice, fam. We need a
Fam.
cutthroat motherfucker who's going to do what we say. Bring these people to
I
their
have a
knees,
question.
fam. Sure.
Sam, I have a question for you. How would
Sure.
this guy do any of that? How would this guy come in and be like, all right, I'm gonna tell Ortega and every Sandinista and every loyal person that really supports Ortega, yeah, you got to follow the Renaissance Act. What gives them the audacity to think they have any jurisdiction?
Yeah. Because
I mean,
it's
I'm
just
just
red
laughing.
meat. It's just red meat virtue signaling to your base of freaking anti-Cuban, anti-Nicaraguan people that are here because they are here because they couldn't stay over there because they went along with the overturning of the government. That's why they came here in the first place. That's all he's doing. He's throwing them red meat. None of this stuff is ever going to happen. Not in Nicaragua. We understand this. We know when Ortega goes Yankee, go home. He fought a revolution to do this, to be able to say this. He doesn't have military bases there. And the Russians are there because of our actions, because we pushed them to go there. Nicaragua has no choice but to make alliances with Russia and China. Why wouldn't they? When after our actions were in there, just killing Sandinistas for gain. I mean, for our own needs. We did not care. This is because of what we have done, not them, what we have done. Put a dog in a corner, it's going to bite back.
And trust me, they have a good relationship with Russia, and that's not something to be lamenting over. That's a good thing for them. It's beneficial for them. It really is. It's beneficial for them to have a good relationship with China. I mean, that's just the way it is. Should it be one or the other? No, it should be an equitable world where everybody has a great relationship. That's an idealistic process. But the way the United States has worked is they bring people together against them because of their
exactly.
actions. So the more they try to say, "Ooh, this country is working with China or Russia," the more they bring these countries together. It backfires every single time.
Yeah.
In the last video, correct?
I think that was the last video. Do we have one more? Or was that the last one?
That
We have
was
one
it?
more? Is that the last one, Oz? We have one more. Let's do it.
We have an increasing challenging situation in El Salvador, one that threatens both the future of democracy in the country and bilateral relations with the United States. Over the last 2 years, President Bukele has presided over a number of alarming setbacks for democratic
I'll
governance,
let you handle this.
undermining judicial independence, intimidating opposition lawmakers by using security forces to occupy the legislature, negotiating political pacts with gangs, regularly attacking journalists and media outlets. And in addition to these actions, Bukele has also repeatedly used his network of Twitter trolls to attack and threaten not only government critics within El Salvador, but also United States officials, including my colleague in the House of Representatives, Congresswoman Norma Torres. It's amazing what he is doing, directing against a member of the United States Congress, and former Ambassador Gene Mans. So I want to hear from you. Do you commit to prioritizing these issues in discussions with President Bukele and senior officials within his government?
Bukele.
Yes, Senator, I do make that commitment to you.
How's that
and
white
I must
guy
tell
gonna
you
go
that
do
I
something?
think the exchange with
Sam,
regarding
you should apply to be
Torres was
ambassador
absolutely
of
unacceptable.
El Salvador.
And I would certainly be happy to make that clear to the South.
So, fam, I had to put it in there to show to make a point over here, right? We've had friends who are very critical of Bukele, right? Bukele, I'm saying
Yeah.
right? Nayib, right? There because of he is the opposite of what Ortega is when it comes to running a country. He's even used the word he's an anti-communist of sorts. He doesn't believe in a lot of social programs. There's a lot of things that he's cut, whatnot. But they don't like him because at the end of the day, he's expressing his national sovereignty for his country to make the decisions,
Right.
telling the IMF to go scratch. And that's what it's about at the end of the day. I want to make a point here that it's not about ideology, right? It's about people or countries wanting their own national sovereignty. And I did have to put out the point, fam, where he goes, I can't believe it. And this is the audacity of our Congress members to think they're just a set of elites, that he went on Twitter and he harassed one of my colleagues, fam, in the House. How oh my God, how dare he do that? Oh. And if a guy named Duncan can be an ambassador, maybe a Jardula could be. A white guy as white as me.
Yeah,
maybe
think
I
you
can be an ambassador.
Maybe, hey, Nicaragua would be better, but I mean, it'd be better if you were Nicaraguan. But maybe El Salvador will take you, fam. Bitcoin Beach will take you. Maybe they'll let you. Yeah. I mean,
Twitter
and I just
trolls.
noticed I got really mad. Fam, that there's all the Latinos in government are all Gusano motherfuckers. Sorry, but for my cursing.
AOC was supposed to be that voice of reason. She was supposed to be
she's
that
just
one.
a fraud.
She hasn't even opened her goddamn mouth.
Nope.
Oh, she hasn't opened up her goddamn mouth. Nothing. From a woman whose name is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, says nothing about the empire.
Got more of the.
Forget about it. It's disgusting.
She's got more of the conquistador in that than anything else.
She is a conquistador.